Well, I'd like to pick up on one element, which is I think the problem of too much money. And I think that's something we see not just in Afghanistan, but in a range of countries. We get into a mindset that no problem can't be solved without a few $100 million in a contractor. Whether it's in cybersecurity or in social development. And I think what this area of system thinking really brings us to think about is to approach it with a mindset of problem identification, problem solving and design. And certainly from what I've seen, some problems will require money in a contractor, but very few of them. Most of them will require radically less money, but an approach of working backwards from a solution, putting the stakeholders at the center. And I think the particular opportunity for us to shift into that way of thinking is obvious at the moment. With the fiscal constraint, we can't afford it anyway. But then rather than getting trapped into a perspective that either we have to move into a period of isolation because engagement is just too expensive, or we have to throw billions more dollars at a problem, we now need to move into a different way of thinking, which is about strategic engagement. And I think Professor Leon Fouer's project, looking at and the work he did when he was National Security Advisor to Vice President Gore of the binational commissions, really starting with the mental models and understanding, reaching common agreement on what the problem is and what are some of the solutions. And certainly the observations I have in our group has seen around the world is that the what are called sometimes the bottom up, but sometimes involve elements of bottom up and top down. But there are mechanisms where people, and they're predominantly bottom up, platforms for change. They do work. Now, one example is the National Solidarity Program in Afghanistan. Instead of relying on billions of dollars in contracts that go top down, and by the time things have been through contractual levels, there isn't much money at the bottom. You turn that on its head. Villages are given block grants directly. This program exists in 28,000 villages at the moment. And the radical, simple idea is the village has the decision rights. They decide what to do with the money. And there are 3 simple rules of accountability that make sure that the money gets accounted for, the accounts are posted in a public place. But this type of program exists in many countries around the world. Its inspiration actually came from Canadian social policy. So these types of approaches exist. And the other element of this is, instead of thinking that money has to come through the aid system from outside, we need to flip that on its head and think, how can the country pay for and sustain itself? You know, many of the countries that are ostensibly the poorest in the world, they score at the bottom of the Human Development Index. Most of these countries have extraordinary wealth. If you look at Nepal, what the Nepalis call the white gold, the ability to generate hydropower not only for its own country, but to sell it to its neighbors, including India. We look at so many of the countries of Africa that have minerals, which can be a double-edged sword. But these countries have incredible unspent money in their own budgets and untapped resources. If we move into an era of looking at responsible asset management, natural resource management, and looking at the connections, I think we can radically reduce costs and improve social development, the well-being of citizens. Well, it certainly is like to hear his perspective as well, and others. And I think absolutely in this model and this system, there were 3 really important lessons that were taken from the design community. The first, as you say, is co-creation of the rules themselves and allocating of decision rights at the level closest to the people. The second is that user-centered design. The design was put forward with the user in mind, giving as much power as possible to the user. And then the third thing is adaptive learning, that as the system breaks or it doesn't work, the citizens come together and they rewrite the rules. But there's a constant process of refreshing the system for the context. On the money flow, well, it's really interesting to me. So the program, and in part due to some really visionary leaders in Congress, did get funded in the end. So
which program?
This system of decentralized, the National Solidarity Program, decentralized block grants to villages. It started off with the visionary leadership of Jim Wolfenson when he was president of the World Bank. He said to some Afghan citizens, what do you need? And they said $100 million, and Scott Guggenheim, who was an American anthropologist who designed a similar program in Indonesia. So it took that top-level leadership to get the system in place. And so it was really an alliance of top-down system design with the bottom-up. So it did get funded. funding dropped off, and then Congress did start to support, some senators started to support the program, and USAID did come behind it. But what's been interesting to me is that there's been a lot of pushback from perhaps Beltway interests who don't want to see the program proceed, and particularly the media. So the big newspapers have been extraordinarily reluctant to tell the story, and I don't know why that's the case. So there certainly, I think, are some interest groups that are not aligned behind this model. The other observation I have is that it's, as you said, it's not the magic bullets, it's not the only thing. This is about village level. In Afghanistan, there was a set of national programs. There was a national health program, there was a mobile phone program that came in, and there were a number of different programs, but not too many. At maximum, there needed to be 8 or 10 different programs, rather than, as Lisa observed, tens of thousands of initiatives that only get in each other's way. So I think we do need to move towards something of greater simplification.
But I wanted to add to that, which you noted here, the other interests that aren't actually interested in effectiveness of development or a peace process. I mean, there are interests that benefit, just as in Congress, from the way the system currently works, which is benefiting a few economic and polite interests while disenfranchising a huge number. I mean, I think that's what we're talking about with the Arab Spring and the Occupy movement, is a lot of the disenfranchised say, hey, the system doesn't work for us. And some narrow elite political and economic interests are able to establish rules of the system that benefit them. And I mean, this is what is interesting if you think about systems being self-regulating. I mean, I think that's what this incredible move from civil society to say, we are going to self-regulate the system here because it's not working for us. And so when the system breaks to a certain point and people get disenfranchised to a certain level, they will take to the streets if they feel like they have no other voice to communicate that the system is not in their interest. How we in the policy community think about those economic and polite interests and manage those spoilers to effectiveness in the development community and the peace process is really what I'm interested in terms of system thinking, because we have to obviously engage with them. I mean, because we are connected to the spoilers. So it's actually moving closer to them and engaging and discussing, building relationships with the political and economic elites, and trying to highlight our interdependentness, that somehow they will also benefit somehow from a system that benefits a more wide set of people. That's incredibly difficult, whether it's the Taliban or the military-industrial complex. I mean, you have spoilers who are interested in their own benefit, and you have to try to engage with them.